same thing.
Sure.
All right. Welcome to the About the Labor podcast. I am your host, Sean Borman. With me, as always, is Nick Olson. Nick, how do you feel about today?
It was a good day. Greg Williams is out of Cleveland. Vic Fangio is out of the division. And Kevin Stefanski is staying on as offensive coordinator. So it was a good day.
Yeah, it's nice to get rid of that, interim tag. Why do they call it interim? I'm not a big fan of that interim deal at all. But pretty big news. I think the Vikings stuck in-house, didn't have to go anywhere. Stefanski signing a 2-year deal. And Nick, I just kind of want to jump right into it and get to your tweet about Stefanski. Why don't you start from the top? I mean, he's 36 years old. What can you see from Stefanski going forward in the Vikings offense?
He's somebody who's been around for over a decade, joined in 2006, so I think he might be the longest tenured guy in the building. I mean, he's up there. Rick Spielman joined at the same time, so been with the organization forever. Started out as Brad Childress' gopher and kind of worked his way up, was tight ends coach, wide receivers. He's basically coached everybody at some point or another, quarterbacks, and now he got his shot finally, and I think he's earned it. I've seen some people be like, well, I'm not too inspired. He was only able to put up so many points, 10 points against the Bears in a win-or-go-home game. And I get that. But I really think Stefanski is Pat Shurmur 2.0. I think he's the new and improved Pat Shurmur. I know that sounds like high praise given how incredible Shurmur did with the offensive talent in 2017 with Keenum and that offensive line. But we have to remember Stefanski was Shurmur's go-to guy in 2017. And when Shurmur got hired to be the Giants head coach, Stefanski was Pat Shurmur's number one choice. He said, give me Stefanski. I want him to be my offensive coordinator. I want to be able to talk to him about the offense every day and what we're doing, what we're building over there. And Zimmer blocked him, as coaches often do when it's technically a lateral move. So he comes with that high pedigree. And now, we were able to get him because the Browns ultimately decided not to hire him as their head coach. However, he was being very, very seriously considered to be head coach, which sounds kind of wild. He's coached. He was an offensive coordinator for all of 3 games. To go from that to head coach of the Cleveland Browns, who, as much as their reputation might seem, like a basement dweller, they're actually the hottest position coach to place to be right now between Baker Mayfield and all the rest of that talent and that defense. I think they've got a lot of talent. So it's a high pedigree for Stefanski to come in. But it's not just his reputation. It's we should be excited because I think from what we can tell in those 3 games after DeFilippo was let go, and we can't judge it too harshly. Remember, when Norv Turner left the Vikings in the middle of 2016, Pat Shurmur took over, and it was kind of underwhelming at first. It's not like the Vikings. In fact, we went on to lose more games after Norv Turner was fired. The offense saw a slight uptick, but it was, nobody thought Pat Shurmur was going to be assistant coach of the year coming into 2017. But once he got his own system and his own scheme, his own playbook, it blew up. And so I think we're really seeing the same sort of story play over with Stefanski. That's the reason for hope right there. Stefanski's just kind of been a sponge. He's seen a lot of different offensive coordinators, a lot of different systems, all the way back to Childress. So, he's been there for Adrian Peterson, power running, Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Bradford, Case Keenum, and all the way back. So he knows what works and he knows what doesn't. And based on what he did to the offense after DeFilippo was let go, we saw more outside zone running for Cook. We saw more inside zone running overall, especially for Latavius Murray. We saw more of those intermediate stretch concepts, levels concepts, guys going to one guy going a deep route to the sideline, one guy going intermediate, one guy going to the flat, short, kind of. So stretch the defense vertically like that way, flood concepts, levels concepts, which was, kind of a Pat Shurmur special, was those intermediate crossing routes, those intermediate levels concepts. So it was good to see, and it was really effective. We saw a lot more play action, nearly double the rate of play action, which is huge, and that's something that Zimmer wants, and that's something that Shurmur was all about. It's a big part of what made Case Keenum so good in 2017. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism. It's also really important to have Sorry, go ahead, Sean. I'm kind of
No,
monologuing.
no, no. I got to jump in because you're mentioning Shermer, Keenum, and the success that they had, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. What makes you think that Stefanski could have that same type of success with Cousins, considering the state of the offense? I'll put it that way.
Well, it's the same sort of scheme as far as we can tell based on what he called from DiFilippo's playbook in those last 3 weeks. And it's the same sort of mindset based on the fact that Shermer wanted him to be a second in command with the Giants. But as for reasons for how's he going to help with the offensive line, I think you'll see the same thing that Shermer did in 2016, which is, a lot of quick passing, a lot of short throws, a lot of designed things. We really saw with Shermer a screen game. When Cook went down, Jerick McKinnon became a powerful screen weapon, and I think we could see the same sort of thing with Dalvin Cook, who's got that same sort of elusiveness, burst, athleticism. So there are things we can do, and I think everybody in the building knows that the offensive line is something that needs to be addressed. And you're already seeing the team immediately, now that Stefanski's in the bag, they're immediately turning towards, okay, let's bring Joe Philbin in the building. Let's get some of these other offensive lines. We need outside help, bring somebody in, because that's, if figuring out the offense coordinator is, item 1A on the to-do list, figuring out the offensive line coach is item 1B. I think you're going to see them be active in free agency and the draft trying to figure that out. And I think, the offensive line was obviously well below average last year, but Pat Elflein will be healthy. Brian O'Neill is really on I think you'll see a big leap forward from him next year. Reef is an okay piece, and if they bring back Compton, Easton, that's your starting five. That's not a bad starting five. So it's maybe it might not be something to be as big of a fatal flaw. That's the glass half full take.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's something to build off of at least, and bringing back, guys like Compton, Easton really won't break the bank in what looks like to be pretty tight offseason in terms of cap money for the Vikings. So, speaking of offensive lines, you mentioned Joe Philbin. I guess that's kind of the latest breaking rumor, going around Twitter. What are your thoughts on Philbin? I know you mentioned you're a big fan of Bill Callahan as well. Who do you think is the best candidate?
I think Callahan's probably my number one choice. And, I'm not an offensive – I never played offensive line, and I'm certainly not qualified to judge who the best coaches are. But I do know Callahan has a reputation as one of the very, very best in the business, up there with Scarnecchia and Munchak and everybody else. So he's fantastic, and it sounds like he's just fed up with the Washington front office has issues. So if he's available, he's going to be, every team in the league is going to be calling him and wanting him. So, but it's a good scheme fit. Obviously, he worked with Kirk Cousins. Obviously, he worked with Tom Compton over in Washington. So there's a little bit of a connection there. Fantastic coach. Joe Philbin, we know him as the Packers' longtime offensive coordinator, head coach, offensive line coach. He's been there for, I think, over a decade. Really good guy. His offensive lines they've been very good. He was interim head coach for the Packers this last year, and they had a fantastic line. They were, I think, Pro Football Focus's number 1 or number 2 offensive line overall. But then, you look to the last year with the Colts when he was their offensive line coach, and they were one of the worst offensive lines. So it's tough to judge those things. I don't know. I think he fits the Zimmer mold as a head guy with head coaching candidate. I think he could be a very good guy for the job. So I get why they're reaching out to him.
Yeah, absolutely. You think there's any chance the guys who filled in this year return? Janocko, Barone?
I think we want to keep him around, but I also think the fact that we're requesting an interview with Joe Philbin like the very same day that we hired Stefanski officially means that this is going to be an outside search, and we're going to look to bring somebody in to be the long-time replacement for Sperano.
Okay, nobody like Mike Tice.
I mean, maybe the problem with Tice. Well, there's two problems with Tice. The first is that the Wilfs came in and fired him as head coach, so there might be bad blood. It was over a decade ago, but do you want to work for the guy who came in and fired you? I don't know. And the other thing is,
I think it's out of the question.
Tice is traditionally more of a power runner, And I think, especially with Dalvin Cook being so suited for outside zone, for zone running generally, but especially outside zone, it's a different kind of scheme. Although Tice does have experience doing zone stuff, so that probably wouldn't be a deal breaker. But it's just maybe there's a better fit for him out there. I don't know. And it sounds like Tice doesn't want to. Tice is done with football coaching, so we'll see. I mean, he was a fantastic coach for the Raiders, so it's worth at least kicking the tires on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Tice is coming back, but that's neither here nor there. Back to Stefanski. You talked about him being a good fit, with taking pieces of Shurmur's playbook in terms of play action, which is great for Cousins' strengths, zone running, which is great for Cook's strengths, vertical stretches, and intermediate routes for Diggs, Thielen. And I kind of wanted to get to Laquan Treadwell and how he's a fit in Stefanski's offense. We saw him inactive Week 16 against Detroit. My guess is in favor of Beebe. I don't know for sure. But do you think Treadwell has a place in Stefanski's offense moving forward? We saw a trade rumor as well to the Raiders on Twitter.
Yeah, I think that was Marcus Mosher, who's a great writer for he writes for some Cowboys sites and for some Raiders sites. But I think that was just pure speculation from him. Although Treadwell fits the mold of the guy who was a first rounder and who a lot of people will see as a reclamation project. I do think Pat Shurmur has a lower opinion of Treadwell than DiFilippo did. DiFilippo was always extremely had a lot of nice things to say about Treadwell in his pressers. Stefanski comes in and he's not even active. So I think that does signal where Treadwell will be in this offense going forward. And I also think, Shurmur loves to go heavier, or Stefanski loves to go heavier, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, a fullback in there. So the role of the wide receiver 3, especially somebody like Treadwell, who doesn't offer, he's not going to be your Jarius Wright running drag routes on third down. He's not going to be your Aldrick Robinson running vertical routes on a deep shot. He's just kind of a replacement level possession receiver, I guess. Maybe that's too critical of Treadwell because he's better than that. But I don't think schematically he's the ideal wide receiver 3 for Pat Shurmur. So I do think his role is reduced, and if we can explore a trade option, I think there are teams out there who would still think of him as Laquan Treadwell, the draft prospect, and not Laquan Treadwell, the draft bust in Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned Shurmur. You think there's any chance of him going to New York, replacing Odell?
It's interesting. I mean, they're pretty talented. Their wide receivers. So I don't know. But then again, we did have the Brett Jones trade, so I know it's a good trade relations there. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, back to Shurmur again. We mentioned, Stefanski and Shurmur, really. We mentioned how Shurmur took over the playbook when he became interim OC, then OC. Stefanski's doing the same. Will we see an analytics approach with Stefanski that's similar with Shurmur, or did Shurmur use that much analytics?
It sounds like this is like a Stefanski original thing, and it was interesting. The report that came out of Cleveland was that it was down to Freddie Kitchens, who was their offensive coordinator, who took over when Hugh Jackson was let go, and was a really smart football schemer, X's and O's guys. And then Stefanski they saw as this young McVay type who was really well loved by the analytics guys. And it came down to the general manager really wanted Kitchens, and DePodesta really wanted. DePodesta he works in Cleveland, and if you've ever seen Moneyball, the movie is about Paul DePodesta. He kind of is the father of sports analytics, and he works for the Cleveland Browns right now. And the report was that Stefanski was, the favorite among the analytics folks in the Browns organization. So, and that wasn't something I was aware of prior to, Stefanski, his meteoric rise. So that's interesting. Although you do pick up on him in pressers and his quotes to reporters throughout the year that he clearly has a mind for the numbers, for the stats. And we'll see how that affects his decision making going forward. But yeah, it's an encouraging thing to see, because I think folks like McVay, with how much he uses play action, folks like Shanahan with the schemes he's running, with Doug Peterson, you're starting to see, and Bill Belichick has always been despite his reputation, has always been a big analytics guy. It's really an area where you can get a competitive advantage. So it's another reason to be really excited, I think, for the Stefanski hire. So hope he lives up to his Pat Shurmur hype.
Yeah, I think we all can hope that. That's super interesting too. I didn't know any of that stuff with Podesta and everything, and he's working for the Browns, so pretty cool stuff. I did not realize that. So, and you talked about in your tweet as well that the players love Stefanski, which is kind of like the Ryan Saunders thing. I don't know if you keep up with Timberwolves basketball.
Oh yeah, I watched that game last night. That was a lot of fun. Other than the
right?
Noel injury, but the win was huge.
Yeah, and you can just see how much better players perform when they get along with a coach like that. So, what do you see with Stefanski and the players going forward this year?
I think it's good to have a good relation. I think especially it's good because Stefanski is a good listener, and that's a really underrated leadership quality. I think you see that, speaking bigger than football, just in business and in leadership generally. I think it's rare to find. It's common to find people who want to be good leaders who speak a lot. It's hard to find ones who listen a lot. And Stefanski is somebody who's been in the organization for over a decade and has had to listen. And so Stefanski is somebody who was sitting down with Case Keenum every week and going through with him and being what's working for you, what isn't. Let's play to your strengths and let's set up your offense around what you do well. And it's the same sort of thing with Kirk Cousins. You do play action well. You're one of the best in the league at running play action, selling the fake, and then reading the field once you get out of your drop back. And so we saw more of that. He was like, Dalvin Cook, you're good at everything, but you're especially good at outside zone. So we're going to kick it up a notch with how much outside zone we're running with you. And Latavius Murray, you're so good at finding those creases in the A gaps and inside zone. So we're going to see more of that from you. And it's just stuff like that where he knows what each player is good at, and he sets them up to succeed in that way. And in that way, I think his relationship with the players, they like him because he's good, but they like him because he sets them up to look good too. So I think everybody in the organization, from the front office down to the players, is excited about the hire.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with him. He was kind of my guy, to be honest, the whole time. I was hoping he'd come back, and it seems like he was yours as well. So yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, yeah, right, PA as well. I think it's cool too. He kind of follows the trend, that you see from a lot of teams with a younger head coach. And not saying he's the head coach, but you never know what happens in the future with Zimmer. Someday he might be. He literally has a contract now that's longer than Zimmer's and Spielman's. So it's nice to have that kind of as a fallback option. So
sure. Although I think you'd have to pry the coaching job from Zimmer's like cold dead hands. He had an offseason interview with I forget who it was, but somebody asked him like, what would you be doing if you weren't coaching pro football? And he like sits back and he thinks about it a lot. And he'd be like, I'd be coaching football somewhere. It's like his mind literally can't comprehend not coaching football. So I don't think Zimmer's going anywhere. But yes, Stefanski's I would not surprise me at all if he's a head coach next year. So
yeah, it's a good point. It's kind of the similar situation as DiFilippo coming in, and we hope the results are different this time around. But
definitely,
that is it. We're going to kind of keep it short and sweet. Just cover pretty much one topic. I know we kind of went array a little bit there, but all in all, Kevin Stefanski is back as full-time offensive coordinator for the Vikings, and we will see you guys next week. Unless, Nick, you have anything else you want to finish with?
Nope, that's it. See you guys.
All right. Peace.